To design, I felt that I would actually redesign this Kielder website. My partner and I quite frequently go to Kielder in our spare time. I was looking on the website again today, and I thought, you know, it's probably a little bit outdated this now. And furthermore, there are some usability issues on here, and some accessibility issues in terms of like the readability of some of the font here. So one of the big concerns for me is that Kielder is a place that it's quite open, it's quite vast, and you know there's a lot of room to breathe, and you can escape there. And I don't think the website really communicated that well enough. It's got this background image here that I feel is okay, but again, it's concealed by all this massive container and the boxes inside. And again, boxes, we did speak at interview about how boxes were potentially not good enough and could maybe be a little bit more exciting. The feeds were a little bit too hidden away here. I wasn't a big fan of this scroll icon here. And I just felt there was quite a few things in here, like the maps and stuff like that could really just be in a simple nav menu. Same with this thing. I think that this nav should really be tucked away, or at least fixed in case people wanted to access it. But the main problem, as I said, was that this overall site is just too small. When I was at Virgin Money, I spoke to a lot of the UX guys there, and without sort of breaking confidentiality, one of the conclusions that we generally got from conversationally is that users don't generally mind scrolling. It's something that's part and parcel of our day-to-day lives, particularly when using mobile devices. So when I actually recreated this, I took on board all of those things, and I came up with a design that looks like this. Okay, and as you can see, instead of using normal boxes, I've opted for SVG sort of images that kind of go on top of divs or below divs, and are blended in with the divs to make it look like that instead of boxes, we're actually got something that's a bit more organic. And again, everything has got a little bit more room to breathe. You can see the overall design of this is so much sparser than this claustrophobic design that we've got here. I still have kept, the brands in as I thought that was appropriate. Again, I've kept all the things that were on the footer, or certainly the things that I felt were the most appropriate to be kept. If I was redesigning this personally for the client, I would consult them on what they would want visible, and I would argue my case for it being otherwise. And I would use there's a nav icon here to potentially to reveal contents a little bit better, very much like the nav icon that I've actually got on my website here, and perhaps with a little bit of subtle animation. I would be interested in having a nav menu that was maybe less of a rectangle. Perhaps it could be a little bit more organic, but I'd have to do a little bit of further research into that, and it's something that I'm quite excited to maybe look into. Now, the big thing for me is that Kielder is a very different place by day than it is at night time, and you get a lot of people that are quite excited to go there because of the fact that it's a World Heritage spot for the night sky. So if I click on here, you can see that I've got an alternate design for the evening, and this can be enabled by the user via this theme select here. All it would take is a little bit of JavaScript and replacing sources for images or colors in the CSS, and we would get something altogether very different that would give potentially a user a little bit of excitement about going there. This is actually my photo from Kielder in the background of the night sky, and I feel like it's been used quite effectively. The trees are now even more silhouetted. The actual structure of the page is very, very similar. We're just purely changing the aesthetics here, but I think we've got something that works. To be honest, I'm quite happy with what I've produced. Now, does this work from a coding point of view? Is this possible? You might be asking, and the answer is yeah. It most certainly is. If you ignore the line breaks here, which I've purely done for kind of because I was just rushing in a test environment to see if I could actually get this to work. Let's actually go to the site itself. Sorry, slash. Oh, here. Sorry. We'll go open up the day and the night one. Without getting too much into the code, you can have a look at that in your own time. What we basically have is a div, an SVG file, and a container inside the div. Now, I must say that let's get rid of this. I've got a container because it's a bootstrap file, so everything, the main content of the site will be found within the container, which I'll come on to in a minute in terms of the Photoshop file. We've got a row. We've got, the elements that are potentially inside here, which is just represented by this H1. We have got the image, which is the SVG file. If I wanted to change the color, I wouldn't just link it. I would actually put the SVG code in myself. But it's really important to mention that this is outside of the container. The reason being is that if you were to make the screen bigger and smaller, so that would respond to the browser window and it wouldn't have a gap between the outside and the actual image itself. And as you can see, if you make this bigger and smaller, it adjusts fine. Okay. Nighttime one also responds just fine. Okay. So in a nutshell, it is possible to code it. If you want to have a bit more look at the actual CSS behind it, feel free to do so. Again, line breaks will be replaced by margins and things like that. It is just a very quick test. But yeah, I'm relatively happy that this is something that is altogether possible. Now, if we were to talk about the actual design now and kind of like how I've organized this in terms of a Photoshop file, what you'll notice is that I've actually organized it as a developer might would in terms of like the divs, and like, you know, the images and how they're arranged and stuff. For example, if I was to go to the sky div here, you'll see that it, you know, all this area would be part of one div. The actual background image is actually like masked behind this this container. And as you can see, no matter how bigger or smaller I make it, it will not exceed the actual container size. Okay, that's really, really important. Okay. So this is just a normal, because the logo, this is just a JPEG file. Ordinarily, it would be an SVG, but I couldn't obtain one without permission, and that's something that I was maybe looking into if I was to actually, you know, push this towards the actual Visit Kyoto staff. Text, I was actually separated from the image. It was part of the image itself, but I've decided to separate it, and I would probably have this as text, so it'd be a bit better for accessibility purposes. We've then got the theme select, etc. Now what you'll see is, other than the actual nav icon, which we'll talk about shortly, everything here is organized within a Bootstrap container area. And I'll show you a little bit about how that works very shortly. This is measured out to be 1170 pixels, which is appropriate for like large desktop screens, anything over 1200 pixels, basically, so the Bootstrap LG class. If I just turn that off momentarily, I'll talk you through the next div. I'm not going to talk to you about every single one because you'll kind of get the points and you can explore yourself. I'm not going to, you know, patronize you at all if you know what's going on with Photoshop. But I just wanted to show you that, like, how these cards are arranged, and I think it's quite important that you see that I actually use this Bootstrap container as a bit of an anchor. So if I was to actually hold down Control and just click on this bit here, you would actually you would see that I do actually have the container selected. If I was to think about how I organize these, I would want them to be organized in relation to the container. So what I did is say, like, cards one, everything that's a part of this group for cards one, including the actual, like, divs itself, the images, the captions, etc. I just used the move tool quite simply and just use these options up here to just sort of say, well, I wanted this left, I wanted this right, etc. So let's just put the cards one in the middle, and it's in the middle in relation to this. That's how everything's centered, you see. If I go to card 2 and I put that to the left hand side, you will see that it's quite easy to rearrange these and swap these about. But generally, you know, without showing it to you for every single aspect of the design on here, you know, basically everything has been done with that Bootstrap container in mind. The spacing is also, and the margins have also, like, considered that sort of thing. And if you look inside the actual cards themselves, you will see that, like, the captions, for instance, are, what's it called? The captions are arranged in relation to the overall card div. There you go. As is the actual, like, the picture itself, which has been masked. Sorry, it is a clipping mask rather, with regards to that circle shape that's on there. So, you know, I have used quite traditional sort of web design methods to not only to group things, but to sort of arrange it and make sure that things are appropriately spaced. In terms of how this would be coded, of course, you'd have your kind of your divs in rows with Bootstrap, and you would be able to kind of like use the text center class within Bootstrap, for instance, to sort of get that right there. Okay, you might want to think about using flex and stuff like that as you kind of go advancing through your CSS. Because we're purely talking about design, I'm just going to crack on. So as you can see, we've now got the water div, and at the top of the water div we have the SVG for the trees and for the rocks, and let me just show you there. So that is an SVG file. What I've done there, as you can see, is I've made the opacity 60%. That would be 0.6 on CSS. And that would obviously, with the background image being this this reflection of the stars, the opacity would blend in quite nicely with the SVG and that. And we did see earlier that that was the case when we actually went onto the internet and onto the browser and saw that. So let me just show you one more time that works. One big difference to the test is that I've maybe stretched this out a little bit because I thought they could do with a little bit more of I thought that the water would maybe bend the light a little bit more than having just a sort of straightforward just carbon copy of what it is. So the social media is very different to how you get on the original website. If we go to the original website again, as you can see, it's very cramped and you have to scroll down, which isn't ideal. I just thought I'd show just one, the latest story instead, as they actually did do on the Twitter, really, and you can read more, of course. All I would do is, I looked on the internet for a number of social media widgets, and I couldn't end up choosing, really. There was just so many. They're simply embedded into the code quite easily using the URL of the social media website, and it would just automatically generate for you via a third party these feeds. It's something that I've not done before, but I did have a little bit of a test and saw that it worked fine. But I must say that I quite like how I've managed to integrate the little bit of the waves at the bottom. That's another SVG file there. If I just show you, let's just go to feeds, and where is it? Wave. You can see that's where the div would actually, that's where the actual the feed would stop. You'd have this SVG file there, and the actual feed div takes up the overall thing there. Okay, I think that's interesting. Now that's not kind of quite right. I think what I maybe would do if I was the programmer there is potentially, or it's from a design point of view, I might just change that actually. I'll just make that bigger, just as the div itself. Alternatively, what I was thinking is that you maybe do a negative margin for that, and that would be fine. But there's no bother there as it is. I don't know why that's happened actually, so do forgive me with that minor lapse. Done with the feeds, and as you know, these are all organised with the Bootstrap container in mind. These could maybe do with a little bit more sort of padding to the right and padding to the left in terms of if a smaller screen, 1170 pixels wise, was perhaps used. We are currently up to the rocks, and one thing I will show you, because I haven't really shown you too much of the SVG files themselves, is just how I actually got them. So if I go to img, I've got these in an altogether different file, sorry, just bear with me one moment. I didn't include this file as part of the actual things that I've uploaded, but I thought I'd show you in this video just for reference, really. So what I actually did is actually took this image here as my inspiration for the overall thing. This is an image that I took in Kielder. I got the sky, the trees, the water, and the rocks, and that's how I came up with the site layout. But I thought, let's take that one step further and actually use elements of the photographs that I have taken and maybe use the outline of them for my actual SVG files. So with my laptop would hurry up, you should be able to see that I actually took the photograph on Photoshop, just used the lasso to actually cut out the actual rocks themselves. I then used the image trace function on them with black and white, and I then just kind of subtracted the elements of it that I didn't want. There's a white element here that I don't want, so it just enabled me to have this as an overall sort of SVG file. To get that into Photoshop, it's relatively straightforward. Just Control-C. Control V, and I just imported it as a smart object, to be honest. And there you go. I haven't minused the front from that, but I have for the others, so it's all good. This is just a process document. Yeah, I would just minus the front here. Where are we? There we go. So now if I copy that, paste it over. That's not pasted as without the white space. Sorry, that took a little while. Right. I think that might be it, to be honest. So to sum up, I decided to change how compressed this all was. I tried to give it a bit more space to breathe. I improved the readability of things. I designed it with Bootstrap in mind. I created a daytime and a nighttime version according to user preference. And I would enable this nav bar to work very much like my site would, have it maybe animated and have the options kind of flying in. And that would include, things like this that would, that are otherwise a little bit redundant on the actual site. I have used some of my own images, but I've used some images from their site too. I am considering pitching this to Visit Kielder and seeing what they think about the design of it, and I may go ahead and make it, depending on my kind of job situation. Okay, right. I hope that was useful. I hope that has met the brief in the manner that was expected. And above all else, I'll tell you what, get yourself down to Kielder. It's an absolutely beautiful place where you will no doubt have a great time. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you once again for the opportunity. I've really, really enjoyed the Python, and I've really enjoyed redesigning this website, and I look forward to doing more work for you in the future. Thank you very much. Goodbye.